Okay, part 4 of this particular video series. And in this one, we're going to be talking about the actual develop module or the develop settings within Lightroom. This is Lightroom Classic, but it could be applied to Lightroom as well. So now that I've done everything else in part 1, I showed you kind of my file management system. Part 2 was importing those into Lightroom and managing the files in there. Part 3 was culling and removing photos. So now part 4, let's develop one of these images, and I'll take you through my process here. So first things first, we're going to go to the develop tab. Within that, I like to give myself a little bit of extra room. Once I'm in the develop tab, I don't really care about the navigation, so I go ahead and shrink that to the side. When I shoot, I usually lock my settings. I shoot in full manual mode, and I lock everything down. I shoot at very specific ISO, very specific shutter speed, very specific aperture. If I hit I, the letter I on my keyboard, it will show me date, photo was taken, all that stuff, but it will also show me my settings. So you can see here, 1/200th of a second, f1.8, ISO 640, and I shot with a 50mm f1.8 S lens. And if you look at all of these photos, that's basically what they all are until you get to the very end where I changed the aperture. Where is it? Right here. So I went to a 2.8 because I went into manual focus mode. When I do that, I like to give myself just a little bit of leeway. And in doing that, obviously closing it down by more than a stop of light, about a stop and a third, I had to bump the ISO up, but my shutter speed didn't change. So I was balancing the exposure with the ISO once I changed my aperture. So what I like to do is I like to find a photo in here that pretty evenly represents all of the photos that, or a majority of the photos that I'll be working with. In other words, I find one that is the average of a majority of them. I then apply the develop settings or create the develop settings for that particular photo and apply them to the rest. Or I create a preset and then apply that preset to the rest. This is a really good example because this is my first time using Lightroom Classic on this new machine, which means I have no presets set up like I do on my other machine. I'll show you that here. Normally they'd be up in here. Under user presets, they'd be up top, but these are all just the ones that come with Lightroom. I don't use them. I use my own. I create my own and develop my own. So I'm going to show you how I do that today, but we'll start with this particular image because I think this one does a very good job of just kind of being an average. I guess I could use that one too. But that one, yeah, let's go with this one. So this one here will be the image that we're going to use for the average of the majority. So I start at the top and just work my way down. Number one, I make sure my color temperature is set. When I set my color temperature for this particular session, I used my spider checker gray card and I set a white balance based on that gray card. So I used the camera. It's actually not a custom white balance. It's a preset white balance, which I then can adjust and use the gray from that card. So I'm going to go ahead and hit I so I can see the whole image. Zoom in here. Everything looks sharp, good hair light. Everything looks good. So we're just going to start. I think the exposure is fine. I don't need to adjust that. I like to go a little bit more on the contrast side, especially with raw images. They come out very flat. The highlights actually look okay. I don't plan to touch those right now. Shadows, I may lift them on the subject only, so I'm not going to mess with those right now because I'm probably going to apply a mask, which I'll get to in another video. This is just general image settings. The whites, I do like to make the whites a little bit more pure white and the blacks a little bit more pure black. I'll go either 10 or 15 with something like that as a starting point. And essentially what you can see with that is if you look at all of the areas on the image that applies to, I don't know my keyboard shortcuts here. So we'll just go -15. So you can look at like his shoulder, for example, here, and the color on the jersey, but if I take that away, it lightens it up. It almost makes it like gray. So if I go -15 again, it darkens everything back down. So it's almost, if you were to grab the tone curve, which is something that is very advanced in my opinion, essentially I'm just messing with the curve a little bit. I'm making the whites more pure white. I'm making the blacks more pure black. All right, so for this, when it comes to portraiture, I usually don't add much texture, and I may still not here, but from a clarity standpoint, I'll usually soften it by 5. So we'll start at a -5 there. Again, whole image. This is for the entire image. This isn't just for the subject. That's a different one. The texture, I do like the background, but if you can see, if I drag this slider all the way up, it's adding an unnecessary texture to everything. I do like kind of what it does to the shoulder though, so I'll give it about 7 there. That's good. Dehaze, I don't need to worry about dehaze in this particular image. Now, vibrance and saturation are something I like to do. Vibrancy, I really like bringing it all up. We'll go, I don't know, we'll start at, how about we start at a 15? I think that's a good starting point. And saturation, I'll usually go 5 or so as a starting point. I could play with it from there. So essentially, if I look at the before and after of the image, you can see the reds are just more red, the blacks are just more black. His face is brought out, but it's also just a little bit softer than the original. So there's not a whole lot of change to that particular image based on my adjustments here. Do I want to mess with my shadows? I might bring the shadows up just a bit. Maybe we'll go 15 on that. Highlights, I think, are fine. Again, contrasts, we'll go 15. You know what? We're going to do 10 on contrast because I am messing with the whites and the blacks. I can use that as my starting point for all the images. Color temperature looks good. Now, that is top to bottom in the basic module or the light module. So now I'm going to go down to lens corrections. I like to apply a lens correction and remove any chromatic aberrations. I have found that with my lenses, the Nikon ones that I use, I usually don't get a lot of chromatic aberration at all. But from a lens correction, I absolutely do like to apply that. And you'll see if I take that off, you see it just warps it just the ever so slightest. It also seems to add a bit of a vignette around the edge. So if I take that off, the cool thing is these are already preset in here. I don't have to do too much with it. I just apply it, let it ride. I don't want to transform, no lens blur. Now effects, this is where you would add something like a vignette. And I may do that later, but I don't do that here and now for the preset. And calibration, I don't do any of that. Perfect. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to create a preset. So up under presets, which is kind of here at the top, it goes navigator, which I actually don't need. Presets, I'm going to expand that. I'm going to click the little plus sign right there, create preset. It's going to look at all of the settings that I've just adjusted for this particular photo. So again, basic, yes, I did. Curve, I didn't touch anything, so it's no problem leaving it checked. Color mixer grading, detail, I did not use any denoise yet. I do that individually. I don't do it on a preset. Lens corrections, enable profile corrections, I will check. So remove chromatic aberration, enable profile correction. I didn't do any manual distortion or vignetting, but I'll leave that. No transform, lens blur, effects. You can check it or uncheck it. I didn't touch it. Remove. Now I'm going to name this style starting point, because that's kind of what it is. I have a style in my editing for this particular one. And you know what? I might even do this. Style starting point, hockey portraits studio. So if I do something like this, now I've got my style starting point for my hockey studio portraits. Put that word there because that makes more sense. And then when I click create, it throws it up here under the user presets. So now what I can do is I can take this image and I can apply that preset. And if I just hover over it, you can see how it's going to change it. So it goes from kind of flat to my preset, my starting point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that one. I'm going to get all of them except the one I've already applied it to. And if you're curious as to which one you've already applied it to, there will be a little plus minus down here, which shows you've already worked on that one. You've already applied some settings to it. So now I just click Style Starting Point. It applies that to all of the selected images. And now if I go like this and bring this side panel back, hide that one, and show my basic, you can see it's done all of that for me here. That's how I'll work this one. That is the Edit tab within the Develop module in Lightroom Classic, just to make it that much more confusing. Basically, I'm messing with the light settings. That is where I start. From there, I can work down to my, what's this one called? Crop Overlay tab. Essentially what this is just reframing the image. It's cropping, it's doing anything like that. And for something like this, I will crop. And I like to keep my aspect ratio original. I shoot in 2:3, 4:6, so I actually like to keep it there if I can. Oh, why is it doing that? There we go. So I had to lock the aspect ratio using the lockup here to the original aspect ratio it was shot in. And then I'll shrink this down a bit. And the other thing this does is it helps me kind of lose the background. So obviously you can see in this particular image, my backdrop didn't cover the whole frame of the image that was captured, of the exposure that was captured. But with cropping, I can do that. I actually also think I'll center him, the athlete, in the photo, and I'll crop off the edge of his stick there. Yeah, something like that works good. I just think he's going to look better centered in the photo. So now if I check off of that, you can see how much of a difference that is in the crop. From this point, what I would do is I would add a mask. Yes, I know how to use masks. Thank you. I would use a mask and I would choose people and I would choose him. There is another option, which is subject. Now, it becomes a little tricky with some sports or some masks if you're trying to choose a person, but in this case, he's obviously holding a stick. So if I hover over person, it'll show me what it's going to do, but I don't want that. If I hover over the subject, it will automatically detect the subject and it will show me, why did it leave the exposure up? But it'll show me what it's doing for the subject. The other way to do it, honestly, is just show overlay. So you can see here, it's got most of it. It just missed the stick right here. So I'm going to add by selecting an object. I'm going to make that much smaller. And I'm just going to cover the stick. It selects it. I'm going to do that again. Cover the stick. Good. And I think that covers him. Now, the way you can test is you can just black him out. Yeah, see, so there is some stuff right here that wasn't captured. So I'm going to add object, see if we can add that in. And we're going to do that one more time for his glove. Perfect. Now that I have this to where I want it, I will duplicate and invert this mask. Essentially what that means is it says, take this mask, but give me the opposite of this mask. So if I do that, theoretically, it'll be just the background, but it's never perfect. So you can see here, it's bringing his stick in. So I'm going to subtract object, subtract his stick, and anything else that shouldn't be a part of this mask. There is another way to do this. If I do select subject, there we go. That looks a whole lot better. I'm going to start in the background first. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take the exposure down just slightly in the back. Total exposure. I don't want to completely go black, right? I'm not going for low key. I liked the little backdrop I had, so I might come down, yeah, 2/10 of a stop. I think that looks good. Now I come back to him, and this is really where I'm going to want to zoom in. So I'm holding the space bar when I'm doing this. If you just try to click, it's not going to do anything. So the trick is you hold the space bar and you can drag the image around. You can zoom in and out. So space bar will be your friend here. Okay, so from here, what I want to do is I actually want to desaturate some of his facial skin, because when I bring up the saturation and I bring up the vibrance, it makes the skin tone just a bit unnatural. And I'll show you how I do this. So first things first, we're going to create a new mask. We are going to go people. We'll use the athlete, and I want the facial skin. That looks good. I'm also going to choose lips. What else am I going to choose here? I think that looks good. Eyebrows, yes, we need that. Body skin, there is none. Okay, so I'm going to create a mask from that. So you can see it's got just his face selected, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to give myself my before and after. And you can see just how much more his skin is changed color since the raw image. So now I'll go back to my mask, choose the one of his face, and then I'm just going to take the saturation down just a hint until it looks far more natural. So I don't want to go too far, right? And I don't want it to be too much. So I'm going to just come down. Right about there looks good, right? -9. I think that's a good place to be. So now if I come out of this and I go back to this image, now it just looks far more natural than if I turn that mask off. You can see just the saturation difference that makes. So obviously we will leave it on because that's what I'm going for. So I've got his skin color looking good. His stick looks good. Everything looks good. Now, do I want to bring up his shadows at all in his jersey? I may, but within this mask, I'll do it within the mask. I'm not going to do it within the full module. I'll take total exposure on the athlete up just a bit, and I'll pull the shadows up just a bit. Not too far because I still want that jersey to be black. So if I go down, obviously it makes it black, but if I go just a little bit higher on the shadows, you get a little bit more of a high dynamic range to this particular image. So just a bit, not much. And then I will also take the blacks back down, which means I can bring the shadows up and balance it. That looks pretty good. No, it doesn't, because when I did that, it messed his whole hair up. So with the background, if I wanted to keep it more neutral, what I also might do is I might take some of the saturation out of the background and make it more gray. You can see how I do that here, gray. Obviously, I don't want it blue. It doesn't really match his team's colors, but I think a blue-gray is not bad. I'm not going to completely desaturate it, but I think if I go, yeah, maybe -16, -20, somewhere in there, it'll look better. So again, if I turn that on and off, you can see how that changes the background. It went from a bright with a little bit of a blue, took the blue away, and darkened it down just a bit. One other mask that I will do are the athlete's eyes, or the subject's eyes. So create new mask, people, that person. I do eyes, eye sclera, and iris and pupil. So essentially, if I don't do iris and pupil, it just looks goofy. I do all of that, create mask, and then what I'll do from here typically is I'll take total exposure up just a bit, right? I just want to bring out the eyes a little bit. I'll add a little less contrast, right? So I'll try to take some of it out. I'm trying to bring out, he's got very brown eyes, so I'm just trying to bring those out. I'll maybe lift the shadows a bit, make the whites more white, and then bring down the exposure again to kind of balance it. My goal is to make it look as natural as possible without making him look demonic, or the subject demonic. So in this case, I actually think I've balanced that pretty well. Go back in and take a look. So you can see if I take that up, obviously that looks very unnatural. And same thing, you go down too far, it looks very unnatural. I think I've balanced it quite well, which is basically a flat exposure. The contrast is what really helps me bring out the brown in his eyes. When you have different color eyes for your subjects, blues are going to be treated differently from greens, differently from hazel, differently from brown. So when you do this, if you do this, just make sure you balance it so it looks a little bit more natural. Now the highlights, I might pull those down just a bit, and what that's doing is softening the white. So the white is still white, I'm just softening how intense it is. Because if I go too high, again, it looks very unnatural. If I go too low, the eyes look dead. I don't know how else to put that. So I'll just bring it down just a bit and maybe take my white up just a bit. So I think something like that looks more natural than it could be. Let's try a little bit more on that side. Bring the highlights down just a bit. Right there looks good. And so now the athlete has clear eyes. You can see the iris. You can see the pupil. You can see the difference between the two. It's just a little bit. Teeth here look okay. One other mask, I might as well show you while I'm here, that I will do is on a subject's teeth. If they are too yellow or they've got staining or something like that, and I'm not going to use an eraser tool, I want to apply it to all, what I'll do is I'll come in here, I will desaturate it just a bit, and you can see how that's already looking a whole lot better. So if I leave it where it was, it looks like this. If I take some of that saturation away, it just brightens them up a bit. The other thing you can do is add a little bit of blue. If they're very yellow, you can add a little bit of blue. Obviously, you don't want to add too much blue, but what you could do is if they were very yellow, instead of relying solely on saturation, you just change the color temperature of them slightly, and they will come out looking pretty good. I'm actually not mad. Not mad at that right there. Minus 25, minus 10-ish. I think that looks pretty good. So if I turn that mask on and off, you can see they go from yellow to a little bit more white, but not on the unnatural side. In my opinion, when it comes to portrait photography, such as this or anything else where you can control studio light or it's just one clear defined subject, a portrait of an individual, you've got to balance technical perfection or technical beauty perfection with reality. I also have another rule, and this is unfortunately a bad example of an athlete to use it on because his skin is very clear. If I had someone who had acne or something, for example, I would absolutely use the little eraser tool and I would get rid of that, right? So let's pretend that this freckle right here is acne. I will make it as small as I need it to. I'll click it. No, I don't want AI. I'll click it and it'll go away. Yes, I know. And now it's gone. So that's how I would clear up acne on an individual like this. In the same way that I would use, that same technique to get any stray hairs that were clearly distracting. Now in this particular image, I actually don't think there are any stray hairs that are distracting. The f1.8 helps that. If you went even wider, 1.2, 1.4, you would have to fight that less and less. But I don't see anything here in this image that is distracting. Now, because this is a freckle, I'm going to click reset. Because it's a freckle, it stays. Anything that is a permanent feature of the subject stays. Freckles, scars, skin imperfections of any kind, moles, whatever. Those remain because in my opinion, that is part of who that person is, especially if you're a parent looking at an image of your child and you know your child has 2 freckles and all of a sudden one of those freckles are gone, that's not a representation of your child. Now, what I can tell you is what I'll do here. This is interesting. So this player used to play for one team and now they play for another team, but the gloves are still the old gloves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can use generative AI to erase this logo right here. And I want to see if it'll make it just black. Let's see if it'll do that. Let's see how good of a job it does. Whoops. Still getting used to this mouse. I like to go a little bit wider than I need to. Okay, so let's click remove and let's see how good of a job AI does with this particular bit. That looks pretty good. Now, the cool thing is you can swap through them and you could say, I like one, there's 1, option 2, and option 3. I actually like option 1 the best. So if I click off, you can see it took the logo on the glove and took it away. So now the distracting element of two different teams' logos in the same photo can be gone. So that would be a distracting element that I would remove from these photos. Let's do the same thing here. I think that looks pretty good. See, now in this one, I actually like number 2 better because it doesn't add any highlights for me. So there we go. We've erased that other logo from this particular image. So now it's very clear which team this athlete plays for. Now you've probably noticed in the top right, my refresh button is a different color. Once you apply a mask and then you do something like the eraser tool or something along those lines, some other AI assisted thing, you're going to notice that that changes color. You need to refresh your masks. So I'm just going to refresh the masks really quickly. Again, very quickly, and it's done. So now I would say this image is very, very close to being a deliverable image. Let's just take a look. This is an interesting little thing here, that, I don't know, yarn fabric thing. I don't necessarily think it's distracting. The orange doesn't bother me on the gloves at all. What you could do is create a mask to desaturate that orange. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's distracting for the image. So what I would do here is I would say that image to me looks good. Ooh, you know what I didn't do is I didn't sharpen this image. Okay, I'll show you how I do my sharpening real quick, and then we will update the preset. So let's say you get to a point you're like, you know what, I forgot to do a certain thing, or, you know, for this particular set of images, I want this preset based on these settings, right? I've got my style, I've got that preset, that's a good starting point. But now I want that as my starting point, then I'm going to tweak it just a little bit. Now I want to create a new preset, or I want to update my preset with current settings. So what I did not do in this image is sharpen it. For me, my style, I know I go about 70 to 80. I'll go about 80 in this case. And the cool thing is you can see a quick preview, but you can also just zoom in and see the preview. You can see how that's already kind of made it just a hint grainy, versus if I reset it, it helps, but I'm going to sharpen it. Don't worry about the grain at this point though. Is it option? It is option. Okay, good. So I'm obviously learning Mac still. It's Alt. If you hold the Alt key on a Windows keyboard or Option key on a Mac keyboard, we're going to mask. So I'm going to drag this masking slider while holding the Option key. And what that does is it shows me the defined edges that are going to be sharpened. And so here, let me zoom out and we'll show you that again. I'm going to hold the Option key, and you can see it's sharpening everything in this image. The white is what it is sharpening. I don't want it to sharpen the whole image. I want it to sharpen the athlete. And even within that, I only want it to sharpen the very well-defined features of this particular athlete. So I would say 80 and 80 is probably a really good starting point. And now you'll notice all that grain that was on his face. If I reset this, you can see all this grain that has come back into the image. Come on now. There it is. All that grain is back into the image. But if I take that masking back up to my 80 point, let's go 80, there it is, it goes away. It smooths itself back out. It's not perfect, but it's there. Now, if I were to apply this to the preset, so now let's say, oh, I've got to update my preset. I can come back over here, go to my presets. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to update with current settings, and I'm going to make sure that my masks are not selected, but I do want to make sure that my sharpening is, because that's what I've changed. All of that looks good. I'm not going to change the name of it or anything. And I'm going to click update. And now that I've done that there, now I'm going to apply that to the rest of these. And that's done. And now when I go into this second image and I click the detail tab, there is my 80 and 80. So I've sharpened it to 80 and I've masked it to 80. Now you notice this one is much darker. The athlete's much darker in that one than in this one. But that's because I applied the mask, darkened the background, lightened the athlete just a bit. So what I would do is all the steps that I just took for this particular image, I'm now going to go through and take all of those same steps for every other image in this gallery. Portrait photography, in my opinion, at least for me, versus sports or commercial work, portrait photography takes the longest to edit because each specific image needs very high attention to detail for portrait work. Now, if I were doing a youth sports game, let's say I was going to go take shots of this particular athlete playing their sport, and I was going to capture action shots or something like that, it is far easier to edit those particular images. The harder part in that case is the culling, because normally, let's say there are 3 15-minute periods for this athlete's sport. I may take, over the course of those 3 periods, if I'm going for the whole team and I'm going to deliver something to the whole team, I may take 1,000 photos. Now I've got to cull down 1,000 photos to a far more manageable number that I can then work with. So the longer time for sports portrait or for sports shooting, sports photography, is the culling process. For portrait photography, it's the editing process, because each image needs a very high attention to detail. So I'm going to go through, I'll edit the rest of these. All right, future Toby coming to you real quick. So I'm in the process of finalizing the edits for these particular photos, and I'm on this last few here, and I noticed on this particular shot, I shot it at ISO 640, but as I zoom in here, you can see there's just a little bit of grain going on, and I'm really not thrilled with the grain that I see. This image is something I like to call color rush. I really like it. It's a cool little shot. I matched the color of the gels and the lights with the color temperature of the lights to match the highlight color of the athlete's uniform, in this case, red. But when I zoom in, I just see that it's a little grainy. Now, there are a couple different ways that you could clean that up, so to speak, or smooth that out. For me, this is a perfect opportunity to showcase one of the AI features within Lightroom, which in this case is denoise. So yes, there are different ways you can do this. For me, I'm going to use the denoise feature. I check that box, and since it's already run, it applies very quickly. It might take anywhere between 20 seconds and 2.5 minutes, depending on your particular machine. But you can see what that does. It just takes away this grainy texture and smooths everything out. And I really, really, really like the way that that looks. In this image, I want a nice smooth, especially with this athlete's, they call it the bubble. Some have a metal grid on their face. Others prefer something a lot more clear without those defined lines. They call this one the bubble. It is a very smooth surface, so I want the image to match that smoothness. So by just applying that little denoise feature, it helps. I could adjust higher or lower as I want, depending on this little slider here. I can obviously drag it way down, and I could go the other way and drag it way up, and honestly, way up just smooths everything out way too much. It makes it almost look cartoon-esque. So 50 is the default, and I am perfectly fine with 50 in this particular image. So I just wanted to come and showcase that. The other thing that I'll show you real quick, another AI feature, is, let's go to this image here. This image has come out pretty good. I haven't done all of the edits I want yet to it from a color standpoint, but what I did do, if I show you the original image and how it was shot, is you can see my backdrop and everything here. What I was able to do is I was able to use the AI remove, use generative AI remove feature for this image, and you can see them here in the corner. So there's that one, that one, that one, and that one. And you can see it just took out those corners and expanded the background that was already there in the image behind the subject. It doesn't always do a great job, but in this case, it did a phenomenal job. And I actually used it on a number of images. And so I just went through, reworked my background to get rid of that thing there. So when you're taking photos during a session, don't worry so much about these little details in the background. That's something you can clean up in post. Yes, it's more work, and of course you want to get it as right in camera as you can. So if you have a nice massive backdrop, absolutely use it. For me, this backdrop worked perfectly, and I knew while I was taking the photos that I was going to be able to clean it up in the background in my post-processing workflow that I'm doing now. So yes, I cleaned everything up in there and it looks great. It came out wonderful. I'm very happy with it. So that's me, Future Toby, coming to you to showcase some of the AI features that are available in Lightroom, specifically the denoise and the AI generative fill. So that was part 4. This is the meat and potatoes. This is obviously going to be the longer one. On to the next one.